Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to take a look at a prototype copy of The Hunt, an upcoming game coming to crowdfunding in March of this year. In this card-based game that plays in under an hour, you either play as the German side controlling the Graf Spee, trying to wreak havoc on Allied shipping in the South Atlantic, or you play the British forces trying to hunt down and destroy the Graf Spee. This game also has an intriguing design team. Matthias Cramer is the designer of the highly regarded game Wargame. Engin Kunter, for her, this is her first game. The artist is Monteys, who, if you've been watching the channel, you'll know is the artist of one of my favorite games from last year, Resist. Let's jump in and take a look at the components and offer some initial impressions on gameplay. Before we unbox, let's just take a moment to set the historical context. Now, the Graf Spee was a German pocket battleship. Most people are familiar with the Hunt of the Bismarck in 1941, but this historical event happened in 1939, September through December. And the Graf Spee was one of the pocket battleships that Germany let loose in the Atlantic to wreak havoc on Allied shipping at the start of World War II. And the Graf Spee sunk 9 different freight ships over the course of the next couple of months, causing the British to dedicate a lot of naval resources to hunt down these pocket battleships. As things transition into December, the British Navy was finally able to engage the Graf Spee at the Battle of River Plate. It was the cruiser Exeter, as well as a couple of light cruisers, Achilles and Ajax, that took on the Graf Spee in an epic battle where both sides basically pounded each other into near oblivion. The Exeter had to leave the battle. Both the Achilles and Ajax then shadowed the Graf Spee as it sought refuge in the port of Montevideo. Now, the British didn't have a really good idea on how much damage had been done to the Graf Spee, but it had taken over 60 hits in the engagement and was in desperate need of repair. The next stage of this epic story happens on a political level, where a lot of the different intricacies of Montevideo's neutral status and the fact that there were no other British ships in the area basically led the British to perform some subterfuge where they led the Graf Spee to believe that the British Navy was already waiting for them outside of the port to pummel the Graf Spee when it left the port of Montevideo. At that point in time, on December 17th, 1939, the commander of the Graf Spee sent the Graf Spee out of the harbor of Montevideo and scuttled the ship because he thought there was much larger resources of British ships nearby than there actually was. And that, in a nutshell, is the story of the Graf Spee that this game portrays. With that being said, let's jump in now and do a little bit of unboxing. First up, the rules. This is a prototype, so that's important to consider. Things in the final version might look different. One of those things, I just want to show a quick glance at the rule book, which will definitely look different. This is a black and white printout of the PDF copy that was provided to me from Salt and Pepper Games. I just want to kind of show it to give an idea of how big and how long the rules are. They are 19 pages. This is all done in color in the final version, I'm sure, and it's going to be a much cleaner printout and things like that. I read through them in about a half an hour, and it outlines what's kind of a very simple sequence of play, but a lot of different subtleties that appear to be part of the gameplay itself. So there's a quick look at that, and we can see kind of Monteys' artwork laced throughout that as well. But now let's take a look at the good part, the stuff that's inside the box. This is a small game. 8 inches by 8 inches roughly is the side of the box, maybe an inch a little bit higher tall, so it's going to travel really well if you're looking for a game to take on the road. And again, I would say the complexity of this game is probably a 2 out of 10 using a wargaming scale. Rules don't seem, they seem that there's some parts you're going to want to be able to play through, and there's some cool mechanics in there, but certainly not a hard game to learn. I think you can learn it in a half an hour and be up and playing pretty fast. Gameplay is listed, I think, 15 to 30, 45 minutes. So certainly under an hour, I think this is going to play out. And what we're looking at now is the counter set for the game. It's a small counter set. We got 14 counters here, so not a huge counter set at all. Each one of these counters is about an inch wide here. And what we're looking at, basically, the blue are the British counters, and I'll show some close-ups of these too. Blue are the British counters. We have 9 freight ships that can be involved in the game, and that's one of the ways that either side can win. If the Graf Spee sinks 5 of these freight ships, it wins. And if 5 of these freight ships get safely to their destination, then the British player wins. Then up here we have the 3 force counters, so these represent the naval forces for the British forces. And here we have the Altmark, which was a service ship that helped the Graf Spee, and then the Graf Spee itself. All right, so those are our counters. Now, I know in the game, too, the Graf Spee is, you write down on a side piece of paper where the Graf Spee is on the map. And so the Graf Spee most of the time actually isn't on the map itself, I think, until it gets found. But there is a hexagonal map here. And I'll pull this out and I'll show a close-up, a zoomed-out version of this. It's really a modest footprint, 15 inches by 15 inches. And each one of these hexes is actually 2 inches wide. So there's not a lot of space here. Each one of these hexes is numbered. And that gets at the idea. When you're moving the Graf Spee, when the German player moves it, they keep track of that movement on the side secretly, so the British player doesn't know where the Graf Spee is. So a big part of this game are the British forces trying to hunt down where the Graf Spee is, and the Graf Spee trying to get close to those freight ships to be able to sink them without getting kind of discovered and identified by the British. So a lot of the mechanics in the game center on that type of gameplay. All right, so there is our map board and everything like that. Looks like a really cool board again. And I should mention too, one thing to keep in mind, this is a prototype, so these are not the final versions. I know a lot of times the color in this will look different. The map's gonna perhaps look different, and some of the vibrancy and stuff like that of the printing, of course, looks much better in a final version. We have some tokens. These are different elements that kind of control some of the variables in the game, and a set of dice. So some modest tokens there as well. And now, the highlight of this very card-driven game, which is the deck of cards. There are these are player, kind of sequence of player aids that you can use, and then we have 2 decks of cards. I think there's roughly 18 or so in each one, and I've got them a little bit mixed up here. There is a German deck, we can see them by the German side on the left-hand side, and then the British deck, we can see it on the left-hand side there, and I think there's 18 in each side. And basically, these are carved up into battle events, which you can play a card either for its event or for its an action point value. And then there's some combinations of those, and there's some reaction cards, and that's kind of from looking through the cards and kind of reading through the rules, the general sense I get is that a lot of the subtleties of gameplay are going to come from the events on the cards, the action points on the cards, how the cards interact with each other, and your ability to be able to use those cards to the greatest advantage. So I think that the highlight of the gameplay is going to be how this card deck works, and I'm very curious to see how the gameplay all meshes together with this, because we've got the hunt and seek aspect, you've got the Graf Spee trying to destroy the freighters and things like that, and then you've got like the final battle, which is a duel that uses the action points and other elements in it as well too. So I think it's a really unique, fast-playing game that I'm curious to see. I don't think you can say much about it until you play it, right? That's probably the best way to say it. Very curious to see how this plays out. But we'll take a look at some of these cards. Now, we're looking at now our this is a German card that's got a battle event. This is Montevideo for the event here. You may repair 2 damage. If you do so and your opponent plays Scuttling in Montevideo as their next card, you lose the game. So, there's a lot of different, what cards does your opponent have? What cards do you have? How might you be able to do it? Now this one here is a hunt event, so you play it on the hunt, Hardwood's Intuition, and it goes out saying the artwork on these is just, yeah. Albert Monteys' artwork is really, it's riveting. It just pulls you right into the event. It's got this kind of elegant charm to it that I just really find appealing. It just makes you want to play the game when you see it. So I'll kind of thumb through these a little bit, and we'll take a look at the card deck here. Fair weather, we've got a mandatory event. There's certain things here. And again, you can play the cards for their events or for their action points, so lots of different things. And I'll show a lot of close-ups. I'll continue to show close-ups of these along the side here. And the gameplay works relatively simply. I think it's pretty quick. You play a card in your turn, and then you draw your deck back up. There's some mechanics for drawing your deck back up to 5 cards. There's some chances you can take with that. There's a search plane that's modeled on the Graf Spee that's got a way that can help increase your chances of sinking the freight ships, but you're going to not be able to do that all the time. So you have to be a little bit judicious in when and how much you use that search plane as well. The search plane breaks. So there's quite a bit of kind of interesting mechanics here that are modeled in this game that I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the whole system comes together. So really looking forward to playing this one. I should mention this too. This is a 2-player game. I don't see any way to play this other than hypothetically to show a little bit of gameplay, which I'll probably do in the next video. But this is a 2-player game, and it's meant to be played 2 players because you've got all the subterfuge of trying to trick your opponent where the Graf Spee is if you're the Germans, trying to figure out where the Graf Spee is if you're the British, and it's that cat and mouse hunting chase game that is really the core of this game. So this, by every means, is definitely a 2-player game, not designed at all for solo. So And it's designed for a maximum of 2 players too. So it's not a 3-player or 4-player game as well. But there we are. Taking a look at the cards, that's pretty much it. A very straightforward game. We've got the map and we've got the cards and a few small set of counters. Plays fast. The Hunt from Salt and Pepper Games. Now, I'll be coming through with, I'm going to do another video here. I'm going to try to play some 2-player games to kind of be able to come back and review the gameplay. Then I'll probably come back and do a video that talks about that and then shows some gameplay as well. I'll just kind of hypothetically play 2 players to give people a sense of what gameplay is like and then talk about my experiences playing a 2-player. So we'll be back shortly. I'll put a link to that video right here as soon as it's ready. Let me know if you have questions, and thanks so much for watching.